So you guys tried to do something new at University of Texas. How did this come about?
So we had a small policy center that still exists. It's not that small anymore. It's now called the Salem Center for Policy, and this was a thing that was some money that was floating around that nobody wanted because icky people had donated it because nobody wants to be associated with money that was actually earned through the creation of you know decent consumer products or anything. And so one of my friends, Carlos, I think you know Carlos,
Of course.
Carvalho,
Yeah.
uh,
And
kind of
you're
took over.
affiliated. We're all affiliated with the Salem Center.
Yeah,
You're in the Salem
right.
Center. I'm part of the Salem Center. Carlos is our boss. So yeah, go ahead.
Uh, so yeah, anytime Carlos has ever tried to make me do anything, you might have an interesting description of boss there. But he runs this center, and basically we had this center. We were trying to do things. We were doing programming, but we couldn't really get what really needed to be done. We needed the ability to offer students a different perspective in their classes than they're getting currently from sort of core classes in the university. And we started this freshman seminar to fulfill one of the requirements, and we try to give so 50 students a year get to see something that isn't nuts about economics and statistics, which has actual information and all of that. But 50 students isn't going to make that much of a difference. And then we looked at all the other people offering these freshman seminars, and those syllabuses are just nuts. And we saw more and more of this. So we came up with the idea, and we got some encouragement from some supporters. I may have suggested that we start using the University of Texas's recommended land acknowledgement in some of our meetings with supporters. So we're supposed to all get up in front of every public event and talk about how we're actually on Turtle Island and acknowledge that we really are, the Comanches should really be in charge or something like that. And so this sort of thing, gradually, some of our supporters recognized that there probably needed to be more done. And so we were, chomping at the bit to do this. And so we came up with this proposal where we would create sort of an independent unit, like a college of, reasonable dissenting thought. And this kind of snowballed quickly. There were some supporters who were excited about it. Some people in the Texas government thought that Texas might be willing to just fund this directly, so it got in the budget. We got money for it. There was a whole agreement between the university and the Texas government about what this was going to be. We were going to be able to offer, hire faculty who wouldn't be able. Right now, if you have sensible thoughts, there are very few departments in at the University of Texas where you can be hired.
Academia is pretty bad. So anyway, so you guys tried to do
So
something
we
about
wanted
it.
to carve out one place where a few University of Texas students could get a sensible education with like objective facts, objective methodology, and not have to go through all of this and maybe get, we had this idea of offering a degree of like sensible history. It's nothing
You keep
particularly
saying
innovative.
sensible and objective. How do you? I mean, when you describe sort of what you wanted to do compared to what the university is normally doing. I mean, I think you need to be. I think they would say they're sensible and objective. So what's the sort
Well,
of
I don't
the?
know, because I think like objective analysis is white supremacist, right? So
Yeah,
they're
I think you're right.
fairly
I think you're right. They wouldn't say objective. They would say sensible given those circumstances, social
they're
realities, or something.
right.
Yeah.
So let's just say we would like to not start with the conclude. We don't want to start with any set of conclusions, much less ones that are so clearly at odds with reality. So
Right.
we want to go back to how gather evidence, test
Yeah.
hypotheses, that sort of thing. So we wanted to do something different. So we proposed this, and the idea would be here. We're going to hire a bunch of faculty who don't assume their conclusions and aren't ex ante committed to any particular set of policies, and who would be unlikely to get hired in the current environment, uh, regardless of quality, just because you can't hire people who don't agree with this nonsense anymore. It seemed pretty reasonable. It's just a matter of like, let's go back to how people used to think about problems before everyone went crazy. Um, and this was a fairly appealing to a broad swath of non-academics. And this was approved, and then we were excited. We were going to start building. We were going to hire people. We were going to offer classes. It was going to be an absurd amount of work. I mean, we're
And
both we're
who approved it? I'm sorry, I'm very interested in the mechanics here because people who want to, maybe do something
so
similar or know how this stuff works.
we got things. We got a line and the main budget for Texas. So we got 2 years worth of funding with the assumption that so it was $3 million a year. The
So some
regents
state
agreed to throw in
legislator wrote
another.
it into a bill. The governor signed it, like you learn
Yep.
in civics class. Okay, go
Yep.
ahead.
Um, yeah, with I'm sure plenty of sausage making that we were kind of away from. The Board of Regents agreed to match this out of their, they get a giant Board of Regents gets a giant pile of money then in the budget, and then the university, then the legislature will provide funding for other specific things. So we got funding directly from the legislature, plus the regents agreed to throw in more money. And then, of course, if this had gotten going, there were lots of donors who were ready to give us even more money, because that's one of the problems. Like, if you want sensible things to happen on campus, you kind of have to pay the university in order to be allowed to fund something sensible. So if you want non-crazy speakers on campus, you have to. If you're a rich guy and you think the University of Texas should have sensible people speak occasionally, you have to fund that and pay a tax to the university. Whereas if you want some crazy person coming in,
They'll do that
they'll spend money.
voluntarily. Yeah.
Um, so we got this. The regents gave the money, and so now this money flows to the president's office, and he's supposed to go and get this set up. And there was this whole idea that the sense you have to do you have to do a national search for who's going to run this, but Carlos was a good candidate, and the ideas were proposed to him, like he was going coming up with the faculty he'd want to work with, and we were talking about who we'd want to bring in, all of that. And then we got ignored for 6 months. And so approximately 6 months. So no communication from the president's office. We're just waiting around. And then
And you and Carlos were the driving forces behind getting all this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Carlos was the one. He was the one out talking to people, and it was kind of us. We had all curriculum planned out. We had lists of names, and then somebody planted an article in the Texas Tribune, which is this like left wing Texas pseudo news organization that basically just it's really an advocacy thing, and they've got close ties to people in the university administration. I don't know who planted it, but they came out with this big expose on the Liberty Institute and how all these evil West Texas millionaires were interfering in the sacred trust of the University of Texas, and that suddenly politics was going to make its way in to the University of Texas, as if we haven't converted ourselves entirely into a left-wing activist machine for the past 5 years. And so then the president, now it turns out the president had picked one of his deputies to be sorting out how this stuff was going to work, and he picked a critical race theorist. So one of the first things he did was make like hardcore critical race theorist who teaches like Marxist dance and doesn't believe there should be a single conservative voice on campus. He made him vice president of academic priorities. Now, this is the guy who's now in charge of figuring out how to set up this new dissenting entity. So we've got a critical race theorist in charge. This article comes out. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
Which came first, the article or the critical race theorist?
So it turned out the critical race theorist had been in charge for months that we didn't know about. And then, article comes out, the president's like, oh no, we can't do what we used to do. He calls in Carlos for this meeting. And then the critical race theorist is sitting there dictating exactly how the thing would be structured. And the idea is, okay, Carlos, we'll let you run this. As long as you just give money to existing departments to hire people they would hire anyway. And you can ask them to hire people, but you can't do anything. So the whole idea of like an independent group, like you cannot hire a sensible person with the assent of the anthropology or sociology department. So the idea is like, okay, you've gotten this money for this independent thing. Instead, we're just going to use it to fund the wish lists of existing departments. And you just go around and tell all the conservative donors and politicians that everything is fine and this is the right way to do it. Now, all of this is the plan of a critical race theorist who's been trusted to bring dissenting, non-leftist thought. So, and at this point, obviously we're not going to go along with that nonsense. We don't have, we have better things to do with our time than provide cover for the president to let critical race theorists run the University of Texas. So Carlos tells the supporters is no, this isn't what we agreed to. We're not going to do this, and that's when uh, the donor, with a single exception, the donors turned on us. The president starts doing his you know, people don't really like the sole qualification for being a president of a university in a red state is that you're good at lying to Republicans. So he manages to get the donors convinced that we are the problem. Oh, we won't play along with the critical race theorist plan, so we're putting the thing in danger. The thing is dead, but they turn on us. The state doesn't step. We communicate clearly. This is a default, but this ever in the Texas state government, they already scored their points from funding this thing, and they don't care anymore apparently. And well, that's what we thought at the time. It turned out that wasn't entirely true. So but we get kicked off the project, and they go out and they find this is another thing. These things, it all sounds crazy because it kind of is. There's this stable of fake conservatives who operate in universities, and their job is they'll come in an initiative like this, and they'll come in as the cleanup guy, and they can go around and be like, oh yeah, I'm one of you, but this is exactly what we need to do. Obviously we can't interfere with faculty governance, even though that we were going to do everything according to the rules, but they could say, oh no, that was bad. Here, I can work with the sociology department. And of course they can work with the sociology department because they have a history of always giving in. So they bring in this guy who turns out to be friends with, we have 2 or 3 professional fake conservatives already at UT. They run this thing called the Jefferson Center. Willem Bowden runs this other thing. These guys just basically go out and pretend to donors that everything is fine, take money, pay themselves, pay their friends, and then do nothing and provide cover for the left to control the university. So they bring in one of their friends from Missouri who had this same deal. University of Missouri, there was a big mess. They didn't, there were crazy faculty out yelling at students, and some conservatives gave money to try to provide a separate thing. And this guy comes in and he takes the money and he brings in a leftist, and they agree on how to spend the money to make sure that the conservatives stop being angry at Mizzou. So that's the guy they bring in with a secret search with his friend who's already here, and we're pushed out, and this guy gets tenure at UT to run this thing, take the money, give it to existing departments, and make sure that everyone sort of stays happy. So
the Liberty Institute is still under this guy's control. It's still at UT.
Well, they've just announced that he was and it's now being called the Civitas Institute because liberty is a loaded word, and we don't want to use that. But
okay, yeah, so I want to see what exactly. I want to Google a little bit. So do they have events? They don't have their own professors. All they do is they have. They just funnel money to sociology.
They haven't done anything. They wasted a year. Like we would have already had stuff. They wasted a year. He just got appointed. It took him a while. I don't know how they bribed poli sci or government into giving tenure to this guy, but he just a few weeks ago it got announced. But it was we got kicked out because we wanted independent hiring. Obviously, there's not going to be independent hiring, or if they give him independent hiring, it'll be under the agreement not to bring anyone in who's actually interesting.
Okay. I don't know. I haven't done enough research. I don't want to be unfair to this guy. I'll take your word for it. So I don't know if he's.
I know. He was reporting on. We were talking to him because he had this thing at Missouri. We thought it was interesting. We were collecting as much information, and then he was reporting back to the UT administration things we were saying to try to get us kicked out of the project. So he was already spying for the UT administration before we came in. But he wrote a book about how abortion is bad, and so he has credibility with the sort of
So they have a press release. They say Civitas Institute will focus on teaching, understanding, appreciation of American values, blah, 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 constitutionalism, limited government, free enterprise and markets, individual liberty, putting together politics. That seems to be all they've done is the...
they have a launch
press
statement.
release.
But the last time, 15 years ago, Rob Coon
This was
Sorry.
just a year ago. This was a month ago. This was from June 13th.
Yeah.
It seems like they were.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
they drag their feet. The goal is to drag their feet and make it look like there's action so that they don't get found out before the next legislative session, which starts in January. So the university has to make it look like they're doing something for a few more months so that they don't get in trouble. Because eventually the lieutenant governor got a little upset and said he was going to end tenure at UT,
Uh,
which
so,
wouldn't
so,
be a
that,
good
so the,
idea.
the different models is yours and Carlos's model of Liberty would be you would be your own, you would hire your own tenure track faculty. And
Yeah.
this model is just they run Civitas, which they give money to say philosophy or sociology, and then do they consult with them? Do they hire who they what do they do? They just give them money, and what else? Like
Well,
how do you ensure that it's going to
they
be?
don't, they haven't really written down any agreements or anything, but my understanding is the idea, the promise that the president made in the faculty council is that the institute will not hire tenure track faculty. The money will be given, and so that and the model that was proposed to us is you go and you offer money to existing departments to hire people, and they get to decide who they hire and not. And
Mm.
there's just no way a current department in the humanities or social sciences, except maybe econ, at UT is going to hire anyone who's even
It can,
remotely.
but does it? Would you have had sort of would you been in a position to negotiate and get better people with these departments, or would it have to been like you just give them the money and they do what they want?
I mean, the claim would have been that we would have negotiated, but the answer is they would have just taken the money and done whatever they wanted. Probably they would have found some very one of these professional, it would have been an opportunity for them to bring in one of these fake conservatives because they could bring in someone who would then provide cover, but they're all when the chips are down, these guys are gonna, like, we have people
Isn't
in
the
law school.
problem that isn't the problem that you have to be sort of you have to be a fake conservative to get along in any of these, like me, I couldn't survive in academia. Like I don't know how you survive. You're older, maybe you came in at a different time, but it's like anyone they hire within academia who's going to be along is going to have sort of sold their soul on this stuff already, right?
Well, and that was kind of, I mean, if you get, like, I'm 43, I think. If you go much below 40, you're not going to get anyone. Like, the filter really started kicking in a few years after I got through. But what you could do is collect a bunch of 40 to 60-year-olds. Sorry, 40 to 70-year-olds. There's probably people I shouldn't offend in the 60 to 70-year-old group. You could collect those people, and they could start. They could objectively look for objectively high quality people who can't get jobs because they have sensible ideas, right? It wouldn't be that if you got one department that could just go out and hire people, you would have the highest IQ department very quickly, just because there's such a strong filter. And people still show up for grad school. In a few years, nobody's even going to go to grad school if they have sensible ideas. So yeah, but you need to start nurturing reasonable people again, and you need to collect enough sensible people in one place that they can create the environment where people can come in. Like, we have some very intelligent philosophers who could do an excellent job of evaluating people in all sorts of fields of humanities, but in 15 years they're going to be retired. So we sort of have a window is closing if you want to create younger academics who don't buy into this, it's just an activist project idea.